On a crisp October morning in 2003, in the quiet town of Willow Creek, Montana, a 6-year-old boy vanished from his own backyard. 25 minutes earlier, he'd been building a fort with fallen branches, laughing as leaves rained down around him. His father had stepped inside the house to answer the phone, just long enough for the world to shift. 9 long years would pass before the truth emerged, and when it finally did, it came from the one person everyone had long stopped listening to. This is the story of Ethan Harlow and a disappearance that would quietly tear a mountain community apart until the silence itself spoke. Willow Creek sits tucked between pine-covered ridges, population barely 4,800, the kind of place where folks wave at every passing truck, where the local diner serves the same pie recipe since 1972, and where everyone knows which families have been there for generations. Neighbors help with snow removal in winter and share garden tomatoes in summer. Secrets here don't stay hidden long, or so people thought. Daniel Harlow was 34 that autumn, a single dad raising Ethan after his wife, Laura, passed from cancer 3 years earlier. He worked as a mechanic at the only garage in town, hands always stained with oil, heart always carrying a quiet grief. Ethan was his light, a skinny kid with messy brown hair, big, curious eyes, and an imagination that turned ordinary days into adventures. He loved dinosaurs, drawing maps of imaginary worlds, and asking endless questions about why the stars moved at night. Daniel's mother, Evelyn Harlow, lived just 2 streets over in the old family house. Everyone called her Evie. She'd been a school teacher for 35 years before retiring, known for her gentle voice and the way she remembered every student's name decades later. After Laura died, Evie became Ethan's second parent, baking cookies, reading bedtime stories, teaching him how to plant tulip bulbs each spring. She and Ethan had a special ritual. Every evening, at dusk, they'd sit on her porch swing and watch the mountains turn purple, telling stories until the first stars appeared. On Saturday, October 11, 2003, Daniel let Ethan play in the fenced backyard while he took a call from a customer about a broken-down truck. The yard was safe, high wooden fence, gate latched, nothing unusual. Ethan was wearing his favorite red hoodie, jeans with grass stains on the knees, and light-up sneakers that flashed with every step. Daniel was inside maybe 5 minutes. When he came back out, the backyard was empty. The half-built fort stood abandoned, branches scattered. Ethan's toy shovel lay on the ground. No sign of struggle, no footprints beyond the fence, no sound. Daniel called Ethan's name, checked the shed, the front yard, the street. Nothing. Panic rose like cold water. He ran to neighbors' houses, knocking on doors, asking if anyone had seen a little boy. No one had. Someone called the sheriff. If you've ever felt that moment when your child is out of sight for too long, that sudden electric fear, you know the beginning of what Daniel Harlow felt. But Ethan didn't come running from behind a tree. He didn't answer when his dad shouted. He was gone.
The sheriff's department arrived quickly. Willow Creek didn't have much crime, so this was big. They searched the yard, the surrounding woods, the creek that ran behind the properties. Dogs were brought in. Volunteers formed lines and walked the hills. Flyers went up overnight. Ethan's smiling face, gap tooth pour in. Reward offered. Daniel sat on the porch steps, staring at the empty yard, replaying those 5 minutes over and over. Evie arrived, pale and shaking, holding a photo of Ethan she'd kept in her wallet. She kept whispering, "He was just here. He was just here." What no one knew, what the search teams, the neighbors, the news crews never imagined, was that someone had seen everything. Someone had watched Ethan walk toward the back fence, heard a soft voice call his name, seen a hand reach over the latch. Someone had witnessed the moment a stranger promised ice cream and a ride to see real dinosaur bones. And that someone couldn't tell a soul. Because that someone was Evie Harlow, Ethan's grandmother, who, unknown to her family, had suffered a massive stroke 2 weeks earlier while alone in her kitchen. It had left her with what doctors later called total locked-in syndrome. She could see, hear, think, feel every emotion, but her body refused to move, not a finger, not a word, not even a blink that anyone recognized as intentional. The doctors had told Daniel and Evie's friends she was in a persistent vegetative state, no awareness, no hope. They recommended hospice. Daniel couldn't bear it. He brought her home to her own bedroom, hired a part-time nurse, visited twice a day. He talked to her about Ethan, about the weather, about how much he missed Laura. Evie heard every word, trapped in perfect silence, screaming inside for someone to look closer. And on that October morning, from her bedroom window that overlooked Daniel's backyard, Evie had seen it all. She watched her grandson disappear. She knew exactly who took him. But her eyes stared blankly ahead, her body a prison. No one thought to ask the woman they believed was already gone. The search lasted weeks, then months. Helicopters flew over the ridges. Divers checked the deeper parts of the creek. Tips came in, a boy seen at a gas station 2 counties over, a child in a blue truck on the highway. Nothing panned out. The case grew cold. Willow Creek mourned, then slowly moved on. Daniel never did. He quit the garage, lived on savings and odd jobs. Every weekend he walked the trails Ethan loved, calling his name into the wind. Evie remained in her bed at home, cared for gently, listening to her son's heartbreak, powerless to stop it. Sometimes the people we think are lost forever are still right there, watching, waiting, holding the truth no one believes they can carry. The first 48 hours after Ethan Harlow disappeared felt like a lifetime stretched thin and sharp. Daniel didn't sleep. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the empty backyard, the abandoned fort, the light-up sneakers that no longer flashed. He walked the same ground over and over, calling Ethan's name into the wind. Evie's part-time nurse, a kind woman named Margaret, stayed through the nights at first, keeping vigil beside Evie's bed while the house filled with police, neighbors, and the low hum of radios.
The sheriff's department worked fast. They interviewed every neighbor within a half-mile radius. No one had seen anything unusual, no strange cars, no unfamiliar faces, no sounds of struggle. The backyard fence was 6 feet high, solid cedar, no gaps big enough for a child to slip through, no fresh damage. The latch was still secure when they checked. It didn't look forced. They brought in tracking dogs. The dogs picked up Ethan's scent immediately, followed it in circles around the fort, then straight to the back fence, and stopped, as if the trail ended right there. One of the handlers shook his head and said quietly, "It's like he just vanished into thin air." Volunteers combed the woods for days. They found nothing, no clothing, no toy, no footprint that didn't belong to searchers. The local news ran Ethan's photo on every broadcast, the same school picture from first grade, red hoodie zipped to the chin, crooked smile, brown hair falling into his eyes. Missing, Ethan Harlow, age 6, last seen October 11th in Willow Creek. If you have any information. Tips poured in the way they always do. A hunter swore he saw a boy matching the description near the old logging road. A woman at the truck stop in Missoula thought she'd served ice cream to a child with a man who seemed nervous. Every lead was chased. Every one went cold. Daniel went on the evening news 5 days later. He sat in the sheriff's station conference room, unshaven, eyes hollow. He spoke slowly, voice raw. "Ethan is a good kid. He's kind. He trusts people. If someone has him, please just let him come home. I won't ask questions. I just want my boy back." The broadcast reached as far as Billings, then Spokane. More tips, more dead ends. By the end of the first month, the FBI had joined quietly. They re-interviewed everyone, reconstructed the timeline minute by minute, examined the fence for fibers, fingerprints, anything. Nothing. They developed a theory. Someone had planned it. Someone who knew Daniel would be distracted by a phone call that Saturday morning. Someone who knew the backyard routine. Someone who knew how to unlatch the gate without making noise, speak softly enough to keep Ethan calm, and disappear before anyone noticed. But who? Willow Creek was small. Strangers stood out. No one new had moved in recently. No registered sex offenders within 50 miles had any recent activity. Daniel had no enemies, no custody battles. Laura had passed. There was no other parent. The case circled back on itself. Meanwhile, in the small house 2 streets over, Evie Harlow lay in the same bed she'd slept in for 40 years. The room smelled of lavender and the faint antiseptic of medical supplies. A feeding tube ran under the sheet. A monitor beeped softly, counting heartbeats that proved she was still alive, even if the doctor said she wasn't really there. But she was. Every single day, Evie heard everything. She heard Daniel come in after dark, sit in the chair beside her bed, and talk to her the way he used to talk to Laura when things were hard. He told her about the new leads that weren't leads, about the nights he drove the back roads shining a flashlight into ditches, about how he couldn't bear to pack away Ethan's toys. She heard him cry, great silent sobs that shook his shoulders, and she screamed inside her head with everything she had left. She screamed the name she had recognized that morning. She screamed the face she had seen over the fence. She screamed for someone to look at her eyes, really look, and see that she wasn't gone.
No one did. The doctors had done their tests in 2003. EEGs showed minimal activity. Pupils reacted sluggishly. No response to pain or voice. Persistent vegetative state. End of story. Margaret, the nurse, was gentle. She bathed Evie, changed the sheets, spoke to her softly as if she could hear, because sometimes nurses do that anyway, even when they don't believe it. But Evie did hear, and every time Daniel left the room, every time Margaret turned out the light, Evie replayed that October morning in perfect, agonizing detail. She had been sitting up slightly in bed. The physical therapist had propped her that way to prevent sores. Her window overlooked Daniel's backyard perfectly. She saw Ethan building his fort, laughing as he dragged another branch. She saw the shadow appear on the other side of the fence, saw the hand reach over, unlatch the gate with practiced quiet, saw Ethan look up, curious, not afraid. She saw the woman smile, saw her kneel down to Ethan's level, heard through the slightly open window the soft voice say, "Hey buddy, want to see something really cool? Real dinosaur bones. My truck's just around the corner." Ethan hesitated, looked back toward the house. The woman said, "Your dad said it's okay. He knows me. Come on, it'll be quick." And Ethan, trusting, sweet, 6-year-old Ethan, took the woman's hand. Evie watched them walk away through the neighbor's side yard, out of sight. She watched the gate swing shut behind them. She tried to scream, tried to move. Nothing. The woman had looked familiar, not a stranger. Someone Evie had seen before, someone who had every reason to stay hidden in plain sight. 9 years would pass before anyone thought to ask the one person who had never stopped seeing. Time has a cruel way of moving forward, even when your heart stays stuck in one terrible moment. By the first anniversary of Ethan's disappearance, October 11, 2004, Willow Creek had begun the slow, reluctant process of healing around the wound.
The yellow ribbons people had tied to porch railings and stop signs had faded to pale ghosts in the rain. The flyers had mostly been taken down by wind or replaced by posters for the county fair. People still asked Daniel how he was holding up, but the question came quieter now, with eyes that didn't quite meet his. Daniel had sold the house with the backyard fort. He couldn't walk past it every day. He moved into a small rental on the edge of town, 1 bedroom, 1 chair, 1 photo of Ethan on the wall. He worked nights at the garage now, fixing trucks under fluorescent lights because the quiet hours after midnight hurt less than daylight. He visited Evie every afternoon, sat beside her bed, told her the same things he'd told her the year before. No news, still looking, still waiting. Evie listened, every word carved deeper into the prison of her mind. She had become expert at measuring time by the changes in her son's voice, the way hope had slowly drained out of it, replaced by something flatter, heavier. She watched the seasons turn outside her window, leaves falling, snow blanketing the pines, spring forcing green through the cracks. She watched neighbors walk past on the sidewalk, waving at her motionless form as if she were a painting. No one waved back, because no one believed she could see them. Margaret, the nurse, stayed on. She had grown fond of Evie in the quiet way caregivers do. She talked to her constantly, about the weather, about her own grandchildren, about how the town still prayed for Ethan every Sunday at the little Methodist church. Sometimes Margaret would pause, look at Evie's eyes, and say softly, "If you're in there, Evie, just give me a sign, anything."
Evie tried. She tried every day, focused every scrap of will on moving something, a finger, an eyelid, even the breath in her chest. Nothing answered. The doctors had come back once in 2005 for a routine check. Same tests, same conclusion. No change. They spoke in front of her like she wasn't there. She's stable, no cortical activity. Best to keep her comfortable. Comfortable. The word burned. By the 3rd year, Daniel had started a small ritual. Every Saturday morning, the day Ethan vanished, he drove up into the mountains, parked at the trailhead Ethan used to love, and walked. Not searching anymore, just walking, talking to his son out loud. "Remember when you found that arrowhead? You said it was from a T-Rex hunter." The mountains never answered, but the silence felt less lonely than the house. Evie heard about those walks from Margaret, heard how Daniel came back quieter each time. She kept the secret burning inside her like a coal that never cooled. She knew the woman's name, she knew the face, she knew why, but the knowledge was useless, locked behind eyes that stared at nothing. The woman who had taken Ethan was still in Willow Creek. Her name was Rebecca Morse, 38 years old, a quiet, polite woman who worked part-time at the county library and volunteered at the animal shelter. She had lived on the next street over since 1999. No husband, no children, kept to herself mostly. People described her as sweet and a little sad. She had lost her own son, Tyler, in 1997, a car accident on the icy highway outside town. Tyler had been 6, brown hair, big curious eyes, loved dinosaurs. Rebecca had never quite recovered. She kept Tyler's room exactly as he left it, door closed, toys untouched. Sometimes neighbors saw her sitting on her porch at dusk, staring at nothing. After Ethan disappeared, she had joined the search parties, carried flyers, cried at the candlelight vigil. No one ever suspected her. Why would they? Grief recognizes grief. It builds a kind of invisibility. But Evie had seen her that morning, seen the familiar face lean over the fence, seen the smile that was too gentle, too practiced, heard the lie about dinosaur bones, the same promise Tyler used to beg for on his birthday. Evie had recognized the voice immediately. It was the same voice that used to call hello across the yards when Tyler and Ethan played together as toddlers, the same voice that had sobbed at Tyler's funeral while Evie held her hand. Rebecca had taken Ethan because in her shattered mind he was Tyler returned, a second chance, a gift from a God who had finally listened. She had kept him hidden carefully, not far, just far enough, a small cabin she inherited from her parents, 30 miles up a logging road, no neighbors, no cell service. She homeschooled him, called him Tyler, told him his old life had been a dream, that his other mommy had been confused, that now he was home where he belonged. Ethan, or Tyler, as she called him, had cried for his father at first, for Grandma Evie, for the backyard fort. But he was 6. Children adapt. Rebecca was kind, patient, loving in the only way her broken heart knew how. She read him dinosaur books, built models with him, sang the same lullabies she'd sung to her own son. Over time, the memories faded, the fear dulled. By 2006, he believed he had always been Tyler Morse. He didn't remember the fence, didn't remember the red hoodie, didn't remember Daniel's voice calling his name.
Rebecca still came into town once or twice a week. Library shifts, grocery runs. She avoided Daniel's old house, avoided Evie's street when she could, but sometimes she passed by. Sometimes she saw Daniel walking to the car, head down. Something flickered in her chest. Guilt, maybe, or justification. She told herself she had saved him. Daniel had failed to protect him. She would never fail again. And Evie watched it all from her window. Watched Rebecca walk past with her head down. Watched her carry groceries into her car. Watched her disappear around the corner. Every glimpse was torture. Every glimpse was proof. If you've ever carried a truth so heavy it hurts to breathe, but no one will listen, you understand a fraction of what Evie Harlow endured. But the body can only hold silence for so long. In the spring of 2012, almost 9 years after that October morning, a new doctor arrived in Willow Creek. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a neurologist from Seattle who had taken a position at the Regional Medical Center. She was young, thorough, and refused to accept old diagnoses without rechecking everything. She reviewed Evie's file, frowned at the 2003 scans, ordered new ones, more advanced, fMRI instead of basic EEG. She sat beside Evie's bed for hours, watching, noticing the way Evie's eyes sometimes followed movement when no one else was looking, noticing the pupils tighten when a loud noise happened down the hall. On a rainy Tuesday in April, Dr. Vasquez leaned close and said, "Mrs. Harlow, Evie, if you're in there, I want you to try something. Just try. Blink once if you can hear me." Evie focused every remaining piece of herself. After nearly 9 years, after millions of failed attempts, her right eyelid fluttered. Just once. Barely. Dr. Vasquez froze. Then tears filled her eyes. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You're still here." The moment Dr. Elena Vasquez saw that single deliberate blink, everything changed. She didn't shout, she didn't run, she simply placed her hand gently on Evie's and whispered, "Thank you for waiting so long. We're going to talk now, I promise." Over the next 3 weeks, Dr. Vasquez built a communication bridge, slow, painstaking, but unbreakable. She started with yes-no questions, 1 blink for yes, 2 for no. Then she moved to an alphabet board, just like the one used in other locked-in cases. Evie would track the letters with her eyes until she reached the right one, then blink once to select it. The first word took 40 minutes. The first full sentence took 4 hours. Daniel was there the day they tried the first real message. He sat in the chair beside the bed, exhausted from another sleepless night, not expecting much. Dr. Vasquez held up the board. "Evie," she said softly, "is there something important you need to tell us?" 1 blink. Yes. They began. It took almost 2 full days, broken into short sessions because the effort drained Evie like nothing else. Letter by letter, word by word, the truth came out.
First, I saw. Then, Ethan. Then, taken. Daniel's face went white. He leaned forward, voice shaking. "Taken? Who took him, Mom? Who?" The letters continued.
slow, deliberate. R, E, B, E, C, C, A. Daniel whispered the name before the last A was selected. Rebecca Morse? One blink. Yes. Then more. Fence, dinosaur, truck, Tyler. Daniel sat back hard, like someone had punched him. Rebecca Morse, the quiet woman from the next street, the one who'd lost her son, the one who'd cried at the vigil, the one who'd brought casseroles to Daniel's house in those first awful weeks. Why? Daniel asked, though he already knew. The final message took the longest. Evie blinked it out with tears sliding down her motionless face. She thought he was Tyler returned. Dr. Vasquez called the sheriff immediately. Not the old sheriff who had retired in 2008, the new one, a woman named Sheriff Torres who'd taken over the cold case file years ago and never quite closed it. They moved carefully. No sirens, no dramatic raid. First, they confirmed Evie's account with everything they could. They re-examined old tips, found one from 2004, a hunter who'd seen a woman and a boy matching Ethan's description near the old Morse family cabin up the logging road. The tip had been dismissed because the boy had looked happy and the woman was local. They pulled Rebecca's work schedule from the library. She had taken a half-day off on October 11th, 2003, unexplained. She had never mentioned it. They got a warrant based on Evie's testimony, the first credible eyewitness account in 9 years, and the circumstantial pieces that now fit. They went to the cabin at dawn on a foggy May morning in 2012. Rebecca was in the kitchen making breakfast, pancakes, the same kind Tyler had loved. The boy, now 15, sat at the table in flannel pajamas, hair longer, shoulders broader, but the same brown eyes, the same crooked smile. He looked up when the door opened, confused. "Tyler?" Rebecca said, voice calm, almost gentle. "Go to your room, sweetheart. Mommy will handle this." But the boy didn't move. He stared at the uniformed officers, at Sheriff Torres, at Daniel standing behind them in the doorway, older, thinner, trembling. Daniel looked at the teenager and saw his son. "Ethan?" he whispered. The boy frowned. "My name is Tyler." Rebecca stepped between them. "He's my son. You have the wrong house." Sheriff Torres spoke quietly. "Rebecca Morse, you are under arrest for the kidnapping of Ethan Harlow. We have a witness. We have evidence. Please step outside." Rebecca looked at the boy. Her face softened. "It's okay, baby. They're confused, just like before." But the boy, Ethan, was staring at Daniel. Something flickered. A memory, a voice, a porch swing at dusk, mountains turning purple. "Dad?" he said, so soft it was almost lost in the room. Daniel's knees buckled. He caught himself on the doorframe. Tears came fast, unstoppable. They took Rebecca into custody without resistance. She didn't fight. She only asked one thing. "Can I say goodbye to my son?"
They let her. She knelt in front of him, stroked his hair, whispered, "I love you. I always loved you. Remember that." Then she walked out, head high, as if she had known this day would come. Ethan didn't cry. Not then. He was too stunned, too tangled in 9 years of a different life. He let the officers guide him to the car. He looked back at the cabin once, the only home he remembered, then at Daniel, the stranger who had tears on his face and arms open. They did DNA right away, 99.999% match. Ethan Harlow. But DNA doesn't bring back memories. The reunion wasn't a movie moment. There were no running embraces, no instant tears of joy, no sudden flood of memories washing everything clean. Ethan Harlow, 15 years old, tall for his age, quiet voice, eyes that still held the same curiosity, stepped into Daniel's small rental house for the first time since he was 6. He looked around like a stranger in a museum, at the single photo on the wall, at the empty shelves where toys used to be, at the man who called himself Dad, standing awkwardly in the kitchen doorway. Daniel tried to speak first. I kept your room the way it was, at the old house. I can show you pictures if you want." Ethan nodded slowly. "Okay." They sat on opposite ends of the couch. Silence stretched between them like a rope pulled tight. Ethan kept glancing at the door, as if waiting for Rebecca to come pick him up. Daniel kept his hands clasped so hard the knuckles went white, afraid that one wrong word would break everything. Social services had placed Ethan in temporary foster care for the first 2 weeks, standard procedure after such a long abduction. Therapists worked with him daily. They explained, gently, that the woman he knew as Mom had taken him, that she loved him in her own broken way, that she believed he was someone else, that none of it was his fault. Ethan listened. He didn't argue. He didn't cry. He just said, quietly, "She was nice to me. She never hurt me." And that was the hardest part for Daniel. The woman who stole 9 years had also given his son safety, books, laughter, a kind of love. Daniel hated her for it almost as much as he hated her for the theft. The trial came fast, 6 months after the rescue. Rebecca Morse pleaded not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect. Her lawyer argued severe, untreated grief disorder, delusional belief that Ethan was Tyler reincarnated, no intent to harm, only to protect and love. The prosecution showed everything. Evie's testimony, delivered through the alphabet board in court, each blink projected on a screen so the jury could see. The DNA, the cabin with Tyler's old toys mixed in with Ethan's drawings from age 6, journals Rebecca had kept, pages and pages of "My Tyler came home today" and "God gave him back to me." Evie was there in person, in a wheelchair, propped up, eyes clear and fierce. When the prosecutor asked if she had seen Rebecca take Ethan, Evie blinked once. Yes. The courtroom was silent, except for the soft click of the camera recording each deliberate blink. The jury convicted on all counts: kidnapping, false imprisonment, child endangerment. The judge sentenced her to 35 years to life, no parole for the first 25. Rebecca stood at sentencing and said only one thing: "I don't regret loving him. I only regret that he had to lose 2 mothers." Ethan watched from the back row between Daniel and a social worker. He didn't cry, but his hands shook. Recovery moved in inches. Ethan lived with Daniel. They started small, shared meals, short walks, watching old dinosaur documentaries on the couch. Daniel didn't push for Dad. He let Ethan call him Daniel for months. Sometimes Ethan still called Rebecca Mom by accident, then corrected himself, face burning with confusion and guilt. Therapy was 3 times a week. Ethan talked about the cabin, about how Rebecca taught him to fish, about the nights he dreamed of a backyard fort he couldn't quite place. Slowly, fragments returned: the smell of pine, the sound of a porch swing, a deep voice reading stories under the stars. He visited Evie often. At first he stood in the doorway, unsure, but Evie looked at him with such steady love that something inside him loosened. One afternoon, Daniel helped set up the alphabet board. Ethan asked his own question, voice barely above a whisper. "Did you see me every day after I was gone?" Evie blinked once. Yes. Ethan's eyes filled. "Thank you, Grandma." He started calling her Grandma that day. By the time Ethan turned 17, he had caught up in school. He made a few friends. He still had nightmares, sometimes of fences, sometimes of cabins, but they came less often. He and Daniel built a new fort in the tiny backyard of the rental house. Nothing fancy, just branches and old blankets. They sat inside it one evening, watching the mountains turn purple. Ethan said quietly, "I remember this color from before." Daniel swallowed hard. "Yeah?" "Yeah, and someone singing. Not Rebecca, someone else." Daniel smiled through tears. "That was your mom, Laura. She used to sing to you on the porch." Ethan nodded. "I think I remember." In 2018, Rebecca was allowed a single letter to Ethan through the prison system. She wrote, "I know you hate me now, and I don't blame you. I took something that wasn't mine, but for 9 years you were my light when everything else was dark. I'm sorry I hurt so many people to keep that light. I hope someday you can forgive the part of me that was broken. I will always love you, whoever you are." Ethan read it, folded it, put it in a drawer. He never wrote back, but he didn't tear it up either. Evie lived to see Ethan graduate high school. She died peacefully in her sleep 2 months later, at home, surrounded by her son and grandson. At the funeral, Ethan stood beside the casket and spoke for the first time in public. "My grandma couldn't move or speak for almost 10 years, but she never stopped watching, never stopped knowing. She saved me with silence, and I'll never forget that." Years later, Ethan wrote a short book, not for fame, just for himself and the people who needed to hear it. He called it The Fort at the Edge of the World. He dedicated it to Evie Harlow, the grandmother who proved that love doesn't need motion, doesn't need sound, that sometimes the strongest witness is the one who can only watch and wait. And in the final lines he wrote, "Sometimes the people we think are gone are still right there, listening, seeing, holding the truth until the world is ready to hear it." If you ever feel like no one sees you, remember, someone always does. Even in the quietest silence, truth finds its way home. Thanks for sticking with me through this incredible and heartbreaking story. If you enjoyed it and want to see more true inspired mysteries like this, please hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Drop a comment below. What did you think about Evie's silence and how she saved Ethan? Your thoughts mean a lot. See you in the next one.